Jude verse 10 begins with the word yet. And I've said already in this series on the book of Jude that we need to take each verse in context of the big picture, not to isolate any particular verse or any particular part of the book, because then we can make it say what we want it to say, as opposed to the balance of the rest of the book. And indeed that's true with the Bible as a whole, that we read it in context of what the Bible is saying in terms of the big picture. I think if we were to sum up Jude verse 10 in a nutshell, we would say that it deals with fallen human nature, that which we read about in Genesis chapter 3, where sin entered into mankind. Some say, well, there is good and bad in everyone, and I suppose in one way, depending on how we see it, in one way that is true, that there are, inverted commas, good people, and there are, inverted commas, bad people, and probably most of us, all of us, do good things and bad things from time to time, so we probably fall into both camps if we're honest. But the Bible teaches total depravity. It's not saying that there's good people and bad people. It's actually saying that all of us, from a theological point of view, are affected by the sin of Genesis chapter 3. And it's one of the main doctrines of the scripture, because if we don't understand the doctrine of total depravity, the fact that we are totally affected by what happened in Genesis chapter 3, if we don't understand that, then everything else that comes afterwards will never truly sink in. We'll think that we're good people, that we don't need to go to Christ for salvation. That's okay for bad people, inverted commas, bad people, but we're good folks, so we can do it in our own strength. We can't. We're all totally depraved, and it's only through Christ, through his death and resurrection, that we can find peace with God. But sinful, fallen human nature, total depravity, it doesn't mean that fallen people can't do good things in God's sight. People do good things. People raise money for charity. People help one another. People do acts of kindness on a regular basis. What it means is that we can't earn salvation through those good works. So we sponsor someone for charity, we help a neighbour out in trouble, we give someone a lift or whatever it may be. That's all very good. It's very commendable, but it will never earn us salvation. That's what total depravity is all about. It doesn't mean to say that we can't do good things. It means that we can't earn salvation through those good things. Secondly, total depravity, it doesn't mean that fallen people have no conscience or perception of good or evil. What it means is that our consciences cannot be reliable guides. The danger with the conscience is that we tell ourselves it's okay because I don't feel bad about it. It's fine to do this because my conscience isn't warning me. Now, our conscience is a guide to a degree, to a certain extent, and particularly if we're in that right place with God, we're really in tune with God, and we're living absolutely right for him, then the conscience can be a decent guide to how we're living our lives, but we can never totally rely on it. And that's why we need the scripture, because the scripture is what we rely on. The scripture is what we depend upon, not on the way we feel. Because even in a subliminal way, we can manipulate our own conscience to tell us that something is right, when in fact it isn't. But fallen people can still do good things. Fallen people can still have a conscience and a perception of good or evil. And thirdly, total depravity doesn't mean that fallen people indulge in every sin to its fullest extent. Some may be good living folks. Some people may live very good lives. But again, back to the point of total depravity, those good living lives will never earn us salvation. Those good living lives will never put us in that place with God that we need to be in. It's only through that faith, that trust, that relationship with Jesus that we can get to that particular place. I think as we look across the world, see the news, read the news, just open our eyes and see what's going on. We can see the effects of total depravity. We see the way that people live their lives in relation to those around them on the news, whether it's on a local level, national level, international level. We see the effects of sin, of total depravity all around us. Jude, back to verse 10, he describes these people. Remember, he's talking about particular people, definite people, not just in a general sense. He describes them as arrogant and abusive, unreasoning animals is the actual term that he uses there. And so we find, you know, that this total depravity, even there with people who are in the church, attached to the church, associated with church, still they were living in that total depravity. And whilst on the outside there may have been a certain front, there may have been a certain show even, Jude is on to these folks. Jude is on to their case, and he can see how destructive their behaviour actually is. And he says that these people, the things that they do, these are the very things that will destroy them. In effect, they're denying God. They might not be denying God verbally. They might not be saying, we deny God, we don't believe in God. After all, these were people that were religious, that were attached to church, that were associated with church. They didn't deny God by their words, but they denied God by their actions. And the scripture does tell us in the New Testament that by their fruit you will know them. And so total depravity, Jude verse 10, total depravity is something that affects all of us. Every one of us is affected by that sin of Genesis chapter 3. It doesn't mean to say, as we've already looked, that it means we do bad things every moment of the day, that we don't understand the difference between good and evil. What it means is we're separated from God. And it's only when we put our faith and our trust in Him, I did it when I was 22, when we put our faith and our trust in Him, can we find true forgiveness of sins and true release and true peace with God.